Good afternoon, everybody, and thank you for coming, and all the ones that are on Zoom. Thank you. I'm your coordinator, Maureen Brown, for this. And the program today is Cruising Past COVID. And it is being presented by Roland, who is a traveler with his wife, Jenny. They have been married for 50 years, and their passion for travel was fueled by their experiences living overseas while Rocky was a pilot in the United States Air Force. And thank you very much for that. They have lived and worked in Germany, Thailand, Korea, and China. And the last several years have visited more than 100 countries in their travels. Rocky and Ginny often share their travel experiences with the Association of Lifelong Learners. A topical member of the Lifelong Learners, Rocky likes to read and learn about new things and share the fruits of his curiosity and travel with others. Rocky, the floor is yours.
Thank you. Well, these are all familiar faces here, so I'm sorry you had to sit through that introduction. Yeah. All right. So we'll go ahead and get started here. And even though we do need mics, please, if you have a question, let's try to get it when it pops into your head at the time at any particular slide or place or something. We'll just make sure that you do get your hands on a microphone so that we can, the Zoom people can hear and we can get it on the recording. But please ask them as they come up because we don't want it to slide by and questions are really good. So many of you have been to my presentations before, travel presentations and others, and this is, I always start with the bucket list slide and then I try to update this thing as we go, and this kind of gives you an idea. Of course, the one where it says Panama Canal in South America 2, this is the second one. We had been on a Panama Canal previously, but it was the old locks. This one's the new locks. And so we'll talk about the differences and talk a little bit more about the new locks during this presentation. And then we've got one coming up, so there'll probably be at least one, maybe two, maybe three presentations out of it. We got a 70-day cruise that's going to circumnavigate Africa. And that's in October for 70 days. So we hit 28 different ports, including Madagascar and about 15 countries in Africa. So should be a good one. These are some of my favorite places. I always put this up to key your memories and think about, thinking about traveling or things, or what are your favorite places. And these are some of ours. The top one left there is Guilin, China, and then the Blue Mosque, Machu Picchu, and that's the Atacama Desert. That's the most spectacular waterfalls we've ever seen. We've been to the big three now, which are Victoria Falls, Niagara Falls, and this one, which is Iguazu, depending on who is saying the word. Falls, and that's on the border between Brazil and Argentina. And then that's the biggest iceberg I've ever seen. That was on a trip to Antarctica. That was about 2.5 times bigger than the ship. The part showing was about 2.5 times bigger than the ship. So that was a big iceberg. And then that's Burma or Myanmar in the lower right. And this one, the first part of this presentation, I'm going to talk a little bit about what goes on post-COVID, traveling and particularly, of course, cruising. Because of this, what do you have to go through? What's the procedures? What's all this kind of thing? And of course, it does change things a lot because of that. And for some reasons, some of the fallout of that is good from a traveler's perspective. So we'll talk a little bit about that. We'll cover that going in, and then we're going to just actually cover the traveling part of it, concentrating probably 30–40% of the presentation on the Panama Canal. This is a list, and we happen to be on Princess Cruise Lines this time. We normally travel on Holland America. This was we're going to talk a little bit more about this particular part of it, but this was a makeup cruise. We were actually on a Panama Canal cruise on Princess when COVID hit in February of 2020. So they canceled our cruise, sent us to the home port, to Fort Lauderdale. We were really lucky because the way our ship was scheduled, we had one more day till we were scheduled to be in Fort Lauderdale. So they just let us go with our normal schedule. We got on an airplane, got out of Fort Lauderdale before the mess happened. So that was lucky for us. And we'll talk a little bit more about future cruise credits later on, but that's how and why we took this cruise. Because Princess at that time, you had your choice of getting a full refund of everything from Princess for the cruise they canceled, or 275% future cruise credits. But that's rolling the dice. Those things are good for 2 years. They have a 2-year lifespan from the future cruise credit. And who knew whether we as a country and a world would be back traveling and cruising by that. So it's somewhat of a risk, you know, but we decided to go for that. And that's why we were on Princess and on this cruise and at this month, because that's the month our cruise credits expired. And we had to go. Vaccinations. Princess at the time required, of course, young children were exempt because there were no vaccines for them, period at the time. But anybody that was eligible to have vaccines had to be fully vaccinated with whatever the full protocol was, not boosters. They did not require boosters. They liked that and they wanted everybody to have them. On our ship, 75% of the people were boosted. So that's a lot. That's a pretty high percentage. You have to think now of these people that are out there cruising this thing, these are travelers. These are not first-time cruisers. These are people that say, let's get back to doing this. So they're gonna do whatever needs to be done, get on that ship. The second thing, and this is a little bit harder to do, and fortunately for us, a week before they left, they changed the COVID testing requirements a little, which made it twice as easy. It was, you had to have a negative PCR test within 72 hours. And you may not know what that is, but that's the big lab one. Typical turnaround time is 3 days, 72 hours. So how do you get this test, get the result back in time? Because you have to have the test within 72 hours. So that made it a little contentious. Now, for us, fortunately, Princess, the week before we were supposed to leave, changed it to where you could use an antigen test. Not a home test, but an antigen test. Those 20 minutes. 20 minutes, you have the result. So that's what we got. We got those. Metered boarding, and we love this. And that means you've got a 15-minute window to hit the boarding line. They send you your time, and in that 15 minutes, you got to show up. And you got to have all your stuff, your vaccinations, your testing, your things, everything with you, or boom, they throw you out of the line. And I don't know what happens to you after they throw you out of the line. You know, I mean, I'm sure they have some makeup procedures or something, but we saw people get thrown out of the line because they didn't have what they needed. That's wonderful. Walk up, no line, no thing, take your picture, get your key, get on the ship. Just like that. So it was really, we liked that part. Masks were required everywhere, every interior space. So if it had a roof over the top of it, you had to have a mask on. Even outside on deck, if there was a roof over the part of the deck you were on, you had to have a mask on. Around the pool, up on the open decks, no masks. required. That was the requirement day one. They changed that. Buffets were all open, but they were served. So you couldn't reach in yourself and grab stuff and do things. So you had to get a little serve, and they had people walking around covering 2 or 3 stations per body. And it worked fine. Talk a little bit more about it. It worked fine because we were on a ship that has a capacity of 3,150 or 20 people, and there were 1,850 people on the ship intentionally. That was the limit they set so that they could maintain spacing, keep the things, and that was awesome because there were no lines anywhere for anything to do that. Of course, masks were required anytime you're disembarking the ship or coming back onto the ship. And every port that we stopped in, if you were in interior space ashore, you had to have a mask on. Every one of the countries and places we went required masks inside, and that's still in March when it wasn't required here anymore. But it was in everywhere we went inside. And then they had a big block of cabins, actually most of one whole floor, they had set aside as quarantine or isolation cabins. So if you tested positive, that's where you went. Got all your food was brought by room service and things, and you stayed in there 5 days. And the protocols had changed to things, and at 5 days, with no further symptoms, you could go back out as long as you were masked and maintained your separation. So if you were in that case, you had to wear your mask all the time for the next 5 days until you reached 10 days, and then you were cleared to go about your business. This is a 15-day cruise.
Rocky,
Yes,
how often were you tested?
we were not tested ever.
So it was only symptoms that,
Yes.
okay.
Only symptoms. There was no random testing, no specific time period testing, no testing unless you had symptoms. We did have some cases. Nobody knows how many because they wouldn't tell you. There was nobody that we heard of or knew about that got sick. Now, they had diarrhea, fever, lack of energy, but nobody got sick, and certainly nobody was hospitalized at all during this cruise, 15 days. Everybody else? This is the ship. Supposed to hold 3,100 passengers, just over. And on this ship, there were 1,850. That's really cool. And yeah, I mean, that is really cool. Here's a picture. That's taken from like the 18th deck, which is the highest deck on the ship, looking down to the pool deck. And there's 5 pools on this ship. And normally anywhere around the pool deck, you can't get a chair. I mean, the chair hogs are out there at 6:30 in the morning, securing their spot, you know, and but look at this. Look at this picture is taken at 2 o'clock in the afternoon. And the reason is at 2 o'clock every afternoon, I went up to the 18th deck and played pickleball on the ship. Now you want to talk about excitement, that's excitement up there because the ship's doing this and the wind's blowing 25 knots because the ship's going and you're in that little fenced in, netted in area. So, but we played. We had a group of people and we played every day out there. So that's what I did for entertainment on sea days. Here's the plan backwards because I couldn't find our plan. We went from Fort Lauderdale to San Francisco. This map shows from San Francisco to Fort Lauderdale, but it's the exact same itinerary. So just read this right to left, and that's what we did. Then coming things. This is the first sea day. Now we had 2 sea days before we did anything on the thing, and that's kind of a typical thing. If you're doing a Panama Canal, it's a long ways to Panama Canal, so typically any cruise you take almost will have 2 sea days. They had an enrichment lecturer on board, George Fletcher, This is his lineup. I don't know if you can you read that slide? Yeah, just kind of take a read down through that list of topics. Every one of those is a 1-hour lecture. Okay. And there's some stuff, I mean, I don't mind classical music, but I'm not a classical music fan. But I went to every one of his presentations and they were fascinating. I learned more about opera than I ever wanted to know. And he's really an interesting guy, totally by accident. We got put at his table. He had a table where he went to eat every night. We didn't know that, of course. Ginny and I do what's called anytime dining, which means you just show up and they put you anywhere. And then we do another thing when you come up and you talk to the maitre d', and they always say, are you happy to be seated with someone else? In other words, do you want a 2-person table or not? And we are always, that's why we do anytime, because we want to go eat with other people, not the same ones 15 days in a row. Well, night 1, we're seated with George. After this, he'd given the first presentation and we're within it. Just a great guy. We hit it off, he and I and Ginny, so we ate with him 4 more times over the course of the cruise, because we enjoyed talking about stuff and things. Great guy, good stuff. This is one of the few cruises I've been on with that many lectures, and really good. This is day 2. This is another lecture, my kind of lecture. Ginny and I, you may or may not know, but I'm kind of a wine geek. So I study wines a lot, and I have a lot of wine at my house. And this was a gourmet. They billed it as a gourmet wine tasting on day 2, and it was. Ginny and I have been to 50 of these things. Various places, ships and all, and this was the best one we've ever been to. It was amazing. So that was a hoot. $50 a head. That's what this costs. So, but the last 2 wines they served cost about $330 a bottle if you to buy retail. So, oh yeah, oh yeah. Not at $330 a bottle, but, and this, we had a balcony. We never do balconies. We've done, I don't know, 30 cruises, and we never do balconies because we don't spend any time in the cabin. We're often around doing stuff and doing things, but remember we talked about the FCCs, 275%. That's 275% of what we normally spend on our cabin. We had 275% of that. So mini suite, outside, and a thing that was somewhat detrimental to the cruise is the drink package, which came with the particular cabin that we booked, which we I don't know, anybody know about drink packages or heard about them? They are, on this ship, $54 a day a person. That's what they cost if you buy one. And the thing, $54. I mean, even at $10, $11 a drink, trying to drink $54 worth of drinks in a day is pretty strenuous. Yeah, that's pretty strenuous. And so, and we would never do that except we had these FCCs. So every day we had some frou-frou drink in the middle of the afternoon. Oh, it was, I could get used to it. Yeah. Oops. And then, okay, 2 sea days. Now we're going to Cartagena, Colombia. Anybody been there? No. That's one of the reasons we hadn't either. And that's the reason we booked this itinerary. Two reasons. That, and it also went to Costa Rica and Nicaragua, which we'd never been to before. So that's why we booked this particular itinerary. 2 weeks before the cruise, they canceled the Nicaragua port because of all the unrest. Nicaragua's not a happy place right now. So all the cruise lines, nobody's going in there. So we missed that, but we went here. This map gives you kind of an idea where it is on the coastline. You can see if you look at the littler map, it's got the Panama Canal on there, and that little thing shows you about how far away it is. And it's on the northwest coast there of Colombia. The bigger, and if you kind of look at this, the bigger version of the map and just get a mental picture of the shape of the city, you'll get to see that again when we get to actual pictures and things here going ashore. Of course, now going ashore, remember, we talked about that. It's all mass, all things. This is, Jenny and I are early risers because right here, I'm up most days now 5:30 because the sun comes in our window at that time. So I get up. This was at 6:30 and there were maybe 20 or 30 people up and around out on deck. And that was really a nice sail-in picture into Columbia Harbor, Cartagena, excuse me, Harbor, 6:30 in the morning. And I will tell you, if there are a bunch of pictures in here in this presentation that are not mine. Usually I don't put any in that are not mine unless I need them. In this case, I need them for certain things. So I'll tell you when they're not my pictures. But if I don't tell you, everything in here are my pictures. This is kind of a long walk from the ship into the cruise terminal. I'm saying maybe between a quarter and half a mile. And that's awfully hard on some people. It's, you know, on the cruise ships, there are a bunch of people on that ship can't do a half mile of walking. But they had flowers and birds and things along the quay on the way, and it was just beautiful. And then you see the sign there, welcome to Cartagena. And this is really the best cruise port entry facility ever. And we've been into hundreds of cruise ports. This place is amazing. The entry, it is a wildlife park kind of a thing with a gourmet coffee shop with Colombian coffee. So great combination. And the gift shop was really, really well done and cheap, which is another miraculous thing because usually in the port facilities, that's where they gouge you the worst, is in the shops in the port. So this is what you see, this little sign walking in. This guy greeted us on the way in. He was in a happy state of mind there. And there were maybe 100 macaws around various places around this thing. I've been all over the tropics, all over South. I've never seen so many in one location. Absolutely beautiful. We spent an hour in this place before we ever went out the gate in the thing, just enjoying everything in this little couple on the left. That's one of my all-time favorite pictures now. It's in probably one of my top 10 favorites of all pictures I've ever taken. Is those two little blue macaws. And then this guy was strutting his stuff. And a lot of flamingos in the area here. And you can see, this is interesting because you can see in this photo why the flamingos stay. Because they've got them all clipped like that. See his left wing? They've got them all clipped like that, so they're not going anywhere. They're all hanging around in the park, because it's all open. It's not fenced or caged or any of the, you can walk right out there amongst the flamingos. So then we're off, and I'm going to talk a little bit about it later on, but I use a company a lot all over the world called Tours by Locals. And we do a lot of individual touring, just Jenny and me and a guide. And sometimes we'll pick up 2 more people off the ship to go with us because we want to be able to go where we want to go, do what we want to go, not have to worry about getting on the bus, off the bus, on the bus, and not worry about waiting for somebody who wants to spend 30 more minutes in the gift shop. So that's what we do. That's what this is. This was our first stop. This was our first stop in Cartagena. This is, you can read the name there. Built in 1536, massive fort. This was Cartagena was one of the transshipment easy for me to say, points for Spain's treasure from the New World. So these ships would all come into the Cartagena, transfer their cargo, meet up with other warships to escort them, and then go to Spain. So this was an extremely important port, and hence it had this massive thing. Now, just a little side note here, it was 98 degrees that day. Yeah, in March. So 98 degrees. And I'm telling you, by the time we got to that little peak at the top up there, we were tired walking up that hill, because you've got to go, you can see how you do the zigzag path to get up to the main fortress itself. That was just about all the work we wanted to do, was that travel up, but a beautiful, beautiful place. Go. Microphone.
That's fall there, right?
No, they're the same as us.
Where's the equator?
The equator's south of them. The equator runs
Oh,
through
south of
where?
them, okay.
This neatly named place, Ecuador, like equator. That's where the equator runs. This is actually not here, but near here is on the Tropic of Cancer. So it's like 28 degrees north. So it's still north, but because of the ocean currents and the traffic, it's always hot there. And we were not expecting that, obviously. We did not expect to be just pummeled by the heat when we got off. But go ahead.
Rocky, so you're walking all that distance. They don't have any little rickshaws? or
Not here.
go-karts?
In this place, they did not. So if you were incapable of walking, you didn't make it to the top. You know, they did not. Most places have some method, golf carts or
Yeah.
something. Now, they had wheelchairs for rent, not motorized, but wheelchairs for rent. So if you had someone with you who could help you in a wheelchair, and we saw some people renting them there, but who in the world is going to push that thing
That's right.
up that hill? I mean, you know, my goodness. So now the other thing, and you find this, and that's a good question, Judy. It's a point that should be made about traveling in general all over the world, is there is nowhere in the world that caters to anybody with any kind of a disability or health issue like we do here in the US. So if you go, there's no special deals for people who have disabilities or who can't hike a mile and a half, or are afraid of heights, and there are no guardrails anywhere. You go, I mean, you just, and it's 400 feet and there's nothing. And that's everywhere that you go. So it's a good point and we had a really good friend that still travels, still does cruises, and she can't walk 2 steps, literally. And she still travels because they get a private company that meets them in a van that's got a lift van and a motorized wheelchair, and she goes. Now, so there you have a potentiality where money can help. So they happen, well, I mean, I'm just, you know, she and her husband happen to have enough money to be able to afford to do that. So they can travel and do the things, but they have to make all these specialized arrangements because there are none readily available unless you do it yourself. Answer
Yeah.
everything? More than answer. Yes.
When you call it a fort and you said that you walked all around, is there places inside
Yes.
that they would hide or what?
Yes. You can't really see them too much in this one, but on just about every one of the cutbacks, there's little arched doorways that go into like tunnels that go back in, and then they go up. So you can get from the top of the fort down into these tunnels and into these defensive positions. And you can actually get all the way, sits on all the way down to the bay. And they actually escaped out of there once during one of the battles because their opponents didn't know about this, and they went down through the tunnels and escaped onto a boat. But yeah, we went into a few of the tunnels. This is up on top. That's Ginny and the little guardhouse over there, cannons. Yeah, I mean, we made it. We had to stop 3 times. I mean, not for a long period of time, but we had to stop for like 30 seconds and get your breath. It was that high going, and we do a lot of activities. So we're not, you know, we really don't mind walking usually, but that got us. She's up here. You can see the defensive walls. Now in that, in the top right-hand photo, if you kind of look up on that hill, you can see this fort is not the highest point in Cartagena. It's kind of the second highest point, but it's the only point that was within cannon range of the bay. So that's why they built it here instead of up on that peak you see in the background in the right-hand photo thing. So they had to, they actually took cannons up the sides of these mountains and fired them, and where they got the maximum range of the cannon and they could still do that, that's where they built the fort. It was all reverse engineered based on their cannon ability to do the thing. Now that thing at the top right, the little knob on the hill you can see in the background there, that's not my photo in the lower right. That's what's up on top of the hill. And that's where we're going, that's where we went next after the fort. And this is the convent of Santa Cruz de la Popa, 1607. So it's been around a long time. A singularly architecturally unimpressive building. I mean, nothing, you know, no redeeming social value to this building on the outside. It does have a really nice museum, and as almost all Spanish churches in South America and Central America, the altar is fantastic. That's real gold in there. I mean, you know, this is the real deal. So this is what you get. Actually, you find, and one thing you do find when you travel is you kind of get churched out after you go to so many cathedrals, because there's 5 cathedrals in Cartagena. And when after you've done the 4th one, you're not really sure you want to do another one, you know. But when you've had a couple months break, then you're still magnificently impressed by this. The other thing I always think about, and we do this, and we've been in, Colombia was a poor country. We spent a lot of time in Peru, in Argentina, all these countries that were controlled by Spain. And you have to think of how they funded this, this church, this convent, and this altar, and who was going to this church. And the answer is peasants. The peasants went to this church. And they spent this kind of money, the Spanish and the government, because think how impressed you would be if you're a peasant and you walk into this. Now you're thinking all the power in the world's right here. That's why they did that, and do the things. And I've told this in other talks that I've given, but every church that the Spanish built has local indigenous articles incorporated into the altar. Pineapples, bananas, corn stalks, whatever the local people recognize and use and would use in their ceremonies, they put it in the altar. So that when people would come in there, they would see things they recognize and say, oh, I know what that is. And so they were very clever about incorporating all these articles into their design. Now, remember I talked about that map, the first map. Here's the view. That was quite a day, wasn't it? Now, the thing about this view here is that the circle you see out in there and all these tall buildings, those are all international, foreign national companies and building. Those are not Colombian, any of them. They're all international companies and organizations. All of that land they are sitting on is reclaimed land. So that's the other thing that amazed me about this particular view and that shot of the city is all those skyscrapers are all built on reclaimed land. There was not anything there. When they were building the fort, digging things out, they built that. And then over 400, 500 years later, that's what it looks like. So that's an amazing, and that's a beautiful, now if you look close up in the very bottom of that picture, that's where the normal people live. So you kind of see the river or the canal there. One side of the canal is the international money. The other side of the canal, single story, tin roof, local people. Yeah, there are. They're well designed. I mean, these things are built to withstand. Talked about tours by locals a little bit. This is our tour guide, Pauline. That's Ginny. We're walking in the walled city. All these old cities in this area have a walled in, the antique part of the city. This dates back, of course, from the 1500s when it originally started. It's impossible about to drive down in there now. They still let cars in there, which is kind of a mistake to do that. Now remember, again, it's 98 degrees still here, and we're out and around. But this vegetation and flowers and things everywhere. Every street looks like that. I didn't get a lot of pictures of this, but every doorway has the big doorways are special doors, and they all have specific meanings based on brass work and the identity of the door knocker. So if the door knocker is a fish, it was a fisherman or a merchant. If the door knocker is a lion, it's an investment guy, banker. If it's cross flags, it's an army officer. You can tell by looking at the gate who lived there and how important they were. How many brass knobs? 9, not so much. 88, a lot of money. So these shots here, and you can see they're kind of a little bit distorted because I'm standing in one place taking that photo around the square that I'm standing in. So look at the differences in the architecture, the time of construction, the usage, what's going on in that one square inside the walled city. So it's just amazing to see that diversity and that much difference between each set. And of course, I threw in the Hard Rock Cafe, but really this picture is all about the local beer, because those of you who know and have been to any of my talks before know that one thing we do wherever we go is we get the local beer and try it out and have that. So that's a tradition, and that's more important than seeing anything else. So when we get a tour guide, the first thing we tell them is we can do whatever you want, except somewhere along the line, we have to stop for a local beer. And we're off. So any questions about Cartagena? And we're off to the Panama Canal, and this will be most of the talk here. You can kind of see the canal there. Cologne up at the north shore there, and then at the bottom, it's not on there, but Fuertes Amador, which is another port, is the little city at the south end. And the other thing most people don't realize is the Panama Canal runs northwest to southeast. Everybody thinks it's east-west. No, it's northwest to southeast, going from depending which way you're going from the Caribbean or the Atlantic to the Pacific side, and that's the way we were going. So we're gonna enter at Cologne there at the top and transit the canal north to south. We do that. This is a little bit more of a blown up view, and I've got one later on, I think, another one, almost the same exact drawing as this. The reason to look at this and spend a little bit of time here, of course, if you look at the transient points, you enter at Cologne at the top, you come in, and then immediately you start going through locks. And you got the Gatun locks and the Aqua Clara locks sets. And if you kind of look at the bottom of this slide, that gives you of the vertical rise that you have to make in order to transient the canal. So you see what happens in these locks, you know, in the Atlantic Ocean and the Pacific Ocean basically are at the same level they are at sea level. Now, that's not exactly true, but it's close enough for government work, you know, on the thing. So somehow you've got to make these transitions up to get high enough to get over the land to get to the other side. Now, what happened is, and well, let me go back just a little bit and with the drawing here, and then we'll go to the next one. In the middle there, that huge part is Gatun Lake in the middle. That's a man-made lake. That thing was created in order to make the canal work. Two things. That lake provides water to run the locks, because you got to have water come in, water go out, things to raise the water in and out of this. So that provides water for that. Secondly, it's navigation space for all those ships that are waiting their turn to enter the locks. And what will happen is, at various times, depending on traffic, though, traffic will be one way, and both sets of locks will be going out if they have an extremely high volume that they have to clear going northbound, which means you've got to wait in here and then you get in line and you go through, and they go through nose to tail, just like this. As soon as that lock opens, there's another one in there coming in, going in to do that. And that lake is the navigation point and the water source there. Here's some background. Here's more information. Yep. Oh, yes, ma'am. Go ahead.
You say the Atlantic and Pacific are almost the same way.
Almost.
Excuse me, you automatically think, why didn't they just dig the ditch deeper?
Okay, we're going to get to that. Okay, can I defer that? All right. Judy, did you have something?
Is the lake, what's the circle up at the top by Cologne?
Oh, that's just to highlight the locks.
That's. what
And
the
so
locks-
if you look at there's a little line, you can't really see it very well, drawn from that circle to the two rectangles. See those rectangles in the lower left part of the thing? I'm going to step away from the thing here, but for the people here, but this circle's got a line to it. That's what it looks like, blown up.
Oh, I see.
Okay. Same thing here. This circle's got a line to it. And that's what it looks like. These locks, the Coca-Cola locks and the Pedro Miguel locks, they're just giving you, this is where the locks are. That's what they actually look like. So it tells that's blown up
So where's the waiting area?
right here. All of this. So they just circle around, and you look out there and you'll be able to see 50, literally 50 ships at a time, just maintaining their spacing, doing the things. It's just full of ships out there all the time. Does that answer, Judy? Okay, onward. Now, here's more than you ever wanted to know about the Panama Canal, but you know when you come to me, this is what you get. So there you go. The first idea for a canal in Panama was in 1534. I mean, geez, think of that. How long ago somebody thought about doing that. In the 1880s, it finally came to fruition to try to do that. So it advanced from being just an idea and a concept to actuality. Now, anybody recognize that name, Ferdinand de Lesseps? Well, he developed the Suez Canal. Now, Suez Canal is what? A dug canal, no locks. It goes from the Mediterranean down through the Gulf of Oman down here, just dug straight through. Why? It's desert. No hills, no valleys, no rocks, no crap. Just dig. This guy did the Suez Canal. So he came to Panama and said, we can do this. And they started digging. Not the same. First of all, there's these things they call mountains. They're not really mountains, but they're 1,000 feet tall. Well, digging out 1,000 feet of rock, not anybody's idea of a good time. The other thing is Suez Canal is what? Desert. How much rain? 0. How much rain here? So what does that mean? You dig it out, and then what happens tomorrow? Washes it all right back in. And so they found after that, because the original plan was to dig it, not have locks. Okay, so that was a great question. I just wanted to wait to hear to get to it. And then they figured this out after spending 7 or 8 years doing this, they figured out they need locks. So who'd they hire? Gustav Eiffel. We've heard that guy, right? Heard of him, and he designed the locks. And then they spent $260 million and they didn't get it dug, and they all went bankrupt, and they actually went to jail. The Lessups and Eiffel both went to jail for fraud, for selling this idea when it was impossible to do. Then in the 1890s, we got involved, the US, but we wanted to dig the canal in Nicaragua. But somebody in one of these lobbyists convinced them that it'd be a lot better idea to just buy France out of their stuff than to start from scratch, because they'd already done a lot of work there. And so in 1902, Congress votes to buy the assets. And Colombia says, and that at that time, this was Colombia. There was no place called Panama. At the time that this happened, that was Colombia. And Colombia said, no, we're not selling to you. We may do this canal. Well, what'd we do? We sent the predecessor to the CIA down there, and we started a rebellion. And we funded the rebels, and they gained their independence and became what? Panama. And then we signed an agreement with them. So that's how we got the Panama Canal Treaty, is by creating Panama. And there's the dollars and what happens and things like that. $8 billion in today's money. Now, has anybody read this book, Path Between the Seas? If you ever, way to go, Ron. If you ever go to the Panama Canal, or you think you're going to do this, read that book first. I mean, no kidding. It will make your trip so much better. I did the first time. Before we went through the first time, I read that book. It was totally awesome. It makes all the difference in the world in your appreciation of what you're seeing and what's happening going through there. And while you're at it, read the rest of this guy's books. And I listed him there. He is really, really good. I mean, this guy can write. And you can tell that 2 Pulitzer Prizes there out of this list of books. And I've read those books, and I can't recommend them enough. Now you see this photo here, the biggest one on the top. That's what the dig looks like when you're doing this. And you can see how many thousands of people are involved. That's what these caliper locks, they're called. They swing like this, and that's the old locks. And they look, and you can see that when they're closed, they're still at an angle like that. And that's to be able to withstand the water pressure so they don't get blown open. So this is into the water pressure. And those are caliper style locks, and that's the size of them. Most of these workers there were from the Caribbean, and they died in droves. Many more so with France, but also with us from malaria and disease. Here's 25,000 deaths, 20,000 French, 5,000 when we were involved. We were involved essentially 04 to 13. Now there's around 13 to 14,000 ships a year go through there. Think about that. Think about how fast you got to move them through, because it takes 8 to 10 hours to make a transit. It's not, I mean, that's the whole canal, 60 miles. And then, of course, we seeded it, control the thing. We had this thing called the Canal Zone. It wasn't Panama, it was a Canal Zone, and we owned it or leased it at the time. And we ceded that back to Panama in 1999, and there was a big brouhaha about that and security. And we did reserve the rights to militarily defend it. Now, so we can still go into Panama and defend the canal. We still have that right to do that. And the slide here again, just to reiterate kind of what we've been talking about, and the two things that Judy pointed about are where the locks are. Well, now we went through the new locks. Why new locks? One, only about 25% of the world's ships could fit in the old locks. They were too big. The ships couldn't fit in there. There were only 25% of the cruise ships, maybe less, could fit in there. They were too big. So they designed these new locks. Now it's something like 79 or 80% of all the world's ships can fit through the new locks. And that's all the reason it's only 80% is they started building this in like 2007. And between then and now, they've doubled the size of some of these biggest ships. So they can't possibly get in there. Of course, and then they went to these rolling lock gates for the locks, vice these mitered gates. And in the old locks, they have these electric locomotives, and they pull the ship and guide it through. Because when I went through the old locks, we had 8 inches per side. That's how much clearance we had, our ship. 8 inches. You can't even see that when you're standing on, I mean, it looks like you're scraping on both sides. And so they cable you up front and back to these locomotives, and they drag you through. You don't propel yourself through on the things. And that's the old locks. The new ones, they're bigger. So now they use tugboats to guide you through. And you do use your own propulsion much more in the new locks. There's kind of what they look like, these what they're designed to be. The only reason, I mean, they function exactly like the old locks. You know, you run water in, you float it up, sail it out, float it up, reach the top, sail all the way across, float it down, float it down. So that's how they work. The biggest difference is, if you see it kind of at the bottom of this picture, is all those little underground tunnels and things. And then off to the sides, there are big holding ponds of water, and they redesigned the way the water flows in and out to be gravity flow only, which is really cool. Really cool design function. This is not my picture. I put this one in here just to show what it looks like with one of the big ships going into the new lock. And that's starting into the lock there. Of course, you've got the control tower on the right. And then that's my picture of us going in. Same bridge, same things. That's off the rear of the ship at the stern, and we are sailing in to the new locks. That's how much clearance we had on each side of the new locks. So it's still not huge, but we're a 3,000 person ship now. When I went through previously, we were a 1,200 person ship, and we had 8 inches. Okay, so this is 3,000 person ship. That's how much size. So we had a lot of room on both sides. The interesting thing, the other slide there with the greenery in that ship, that's the old locks. So while we're going through, we can look over across there, and there's our partner. That ship went through all the way along with us. It was pretty much right next to us the whole transit way. It was in the old locks. Much cheaper to go through the old locks than the new ones, because you're a smaller ship and then do things. This is in here just to give you an idea of what's going on. If you look at the paint marks on the cement, the length of the new locks is 1,400 feet. This picture was taken from our balcony cabin, from our balcony rail. So every lock that we would stop in, and there are 6 locks, every lock you'd stop in, that's where we would stop. So we were 400 feet in our cabin from the front of the lock, and 1,000 feet from the back of the lock in our cabin. And they're marked off like that. So that's kind of cool. This is the lock gate, the rolling gate. If you can see that, it just is a big slab of metal and it just rolls straight out, straight across the canal of the lock. Big piece of equipment. That's us. That's the stern. That's out. We're out of the first lock. That's the first set of locks behind us. And we're on the way. And then we do that more times and we go into things. And so, you know, of course, we'd been through this before, so it wasn't nearly as cool for us to see every little thing, especially when the old locks, when you're watching these locomotives pull you with 8 inches of clearance. But it's just beautiful. The bridges are beautiful. This is the thing, but it's grueling work because, you know, we started our transit at 6:30. This is about 9 o'clock in the morning now. So Ginny and I had to take a break at 9 o'clock. And then because we had the drink package and it's 9 o'clock in the morning, must be time for what? Bloody Marys. There you go. So that's it. Yeah, off we go. Fuertes Amador. And this is the port and the fort that's at the south end. So Cologne at the north end, Fuertes Amador. This was a port stop. So after we transited thing, next morning, 6 a.m., we're here, in here. Again, private tour. This is a museum not open because of COVID. This is a diversity museum. But this guy has won like 20 architectural design awards worldwide. He did the Guggenheim Museum in Barcelona, Spain, which is an unbelievable thing. And this in Panama. So just kind of a really cool architectural, that's on the road on the way into town. We went to Panama Viejo, which was the old settlement of Panama back then, 1519. This is the old ruins. It is really a ruins. It's only in the last 20 years or so that Panama has started to try to dig this out and reconstruct it and save it, this old city. This is an active archaeological site. And so we stood around for a few minutes in several different places like this. There were probably 20 to 30 people working at various places throughout this little site, digging stuff up. And so that's the first time we'd ever really been in a place where they actively were doing archaeology while we were there. This is stuff they found. Now, that painting was in these places back in the 1600s. So somewhere in when they were doing this, there were some protected places. This is a museum that's right there as part of this place. Beautiful paintings. That painting's from the 1500s. Wood carvings also from the 1500s. These are statuary from the chapel at the time, 1600s. And then we went from there and we went down and we're doing our walking tour of downtown Fuertes Amador and things. And we parked in a parking lot and started to walk in toward town. And this is the first little street we walked down. And this is El Chorrillo. And it's a neighborhood. And if you read the State Department warnings, they say, do not go into El Chorrillo. So of course, where do we start? El Chorrillo. And off we go into this is, according to the guides, there's no way to figure it out, but 90% squatters. This is not a real place. These people, they're all squatting, they're stealing electricity, carrying water in pails, this kind of thing. The development of Panama City, and if you look at the pictures, the new pictures of Panama City, it looks like that photo that we looked of Cartagena. It looks like that, stainless steel skyscrapers, this and that and this is about 2 miles from there. And what happened is the development's been going like this, working its way slowly this is to the west, slowly to the west from where the money is. Well, this hasn't developed yet. This is outside the development zone. So this is where people who come in from the countryside, indigenous people, no money, they come here and they squat and they can live and they can get a job in the city, they hope. We've seen this in several different big cities throughout the world, the same exact style. These are all people living in all these places. And the reason this picture is in there, if you look at the person in the right-hand side, got their hand in the, he's stopping a car that's behind us. But if you look to his right over there, that's the exact same picture from the one slide before. And right there is where the new development finished, started. So that's the last building to be development in the movement. And then from that seam that you see that way is what all these other pictures were. Looks just like that. So it's just a demarcation line, just like that. Then you walk another, this is probably 2 or 3 more blocks after we got into the development zone. It's not totally development, we're in the development zone. And this is the Santa Ana neighborhood. It's totally different. And you can see that by looking around at the buildings and things in the background, the people sitting around on benches. It's pretty well developed. This is a little plaza park and they're all over. Every 3 or 4 blocks got a little park like this and it's full of people hanging out. There are these murals everywhere, which I love. Every time I see a mural, I take a picture. And this is a great place, Cafe Coca-Cola. It opened in 1875. It's the oldest cafe, oldest restaurant in Panama, continuously going. It was there, and it's the only cafe or business like this in the world that officially, legally can use the name Coca-Cola in their license, in their name. And the reason is that when Coca-Cola was designed and developed, the first place they got their sugar from was Panama. So the Panama area right around here provided them sugar. They developed it. They made the syrup, the Coca-Cola syrup, to make the thing there. So they opened a cafe. That's the first place that served Coca-Cola on the place, was here the time. So we ate lunch there. That was really cool. Really, really cool. Typical Panamanian lunch. A lot of people would not like it. Beans and more beans and a different kind of beans and rice. And yeah, it's beans. Oh, I forgot. Balboa. So that's at the bottom left. That's the local Panamanian beer that we had with lunch. And not there, we had it there, drank it there. They don't have a liquor license, Cafe Coca-Cola. They don't have any beer or anything. So the tour guide went, ran out, came back, 2 cold beers to go with lunch. So there we have it. And now we're into the fully developed part. This is Casa Viejo, not Panama Viejo, different place. Some beautiful architecture. This is the cathedral. That's the interior. Once again, amazing, amazing places in architecture, artwork, old ruins. Oh, extra slide. This is a school funded by the United States. So it's an elementary school funded by the United States. And now what? Now we're out and we're walking back again through El Chorrillo to get to our car. Right back into this. And that was 4 miles of walking, that part there. So we were a couple of tired Jose's by the time we got back to the car. So we said, we had a specialty dinner that night, specialty restaurant. This is not the main dining room. This is a specialty restaurant, and that's what our meal looked like. Yeah. And off to Puntarenas, Costa Rica. We're coming into the pier here, so we don't need to tender ashore. This was interesting. That's the captain's little hangy out part there at the top where he brings you in. and he almost knocked that light pole over. That light pole was bent like this out with that bridge hitting it. And they saw it and backed the thing out and it went, and that was it. So we just about snapped that thing off. So that picture was taken when it was still touching the ship at that point. This is what we did in Puntarenas. Puntarenas and Tom and I were talking this morning. Costa Rica is famous for its jungles, its water, its wildlife, birds, and active volcano. Well, where we're at, we're a long ways from active volcano. They're in the north part. So we did an ATV adventure, and this is self-drive. We're in these things here. We'd been on the road through the hills and the jungle for about 20 minutes when we stopped here to go to the waterfalls. That's the view from where we were standing, and that's the little waterfall as you walk down this log, down the little log there, down into the waterfalls. And that's the sum total of the scenic traveling on the ATV, because why you're really going is this. These are not my pictures, but this is exactly what we did. I mean, exactly what we did. And similar vehicles. The reason they're not my pictures is the company that we were with, of course, they take pictures. They have people at every one of these water holes. They've got things. They wanted $80 for each individual vehicle's pictures. And the whole tour didn't cost hardly that much, you know. So we said, I don't think we'll be spending $80. So I wanted to try to find some pictures to show you what we did. And this lasted about an hour and a half of this. And when we finished, you see what these people look like in the bottom right-hand side there. You could not tell who anybody was. They were solid mud. Solid. We were too. 100% solid. You had your mask, and Ginny and I had some pull-up masks, which saved you from getting it anywhere else. But that's what we did. And it was a hoot. I mean, we were laughing. Then we went here to the Tarcoles River after we cleaned up a little bit as best we could. I just put this is not our boat that we were on, but one just like this. But we got on at this little docking place. I wanted to show you how you talked, Judy, about what provisions do they have to get up. Well, that's how you get onto this. It wasn't easy. And this thing's rocking and doing this. And so I'm surprised that some of these people could get on the boat. We were on a boat just like this, but this is not ours. And then the first thing we saw as we're cruising down the river is this little iguana sitting off on the side of the thing. That little iguana, if you went from the tip of his tail to his nose, is 10 feet long. That's how big that iguana is. You can't really tell that in that picture. That was one big Jose. That is a big iguana. And then this is what you come for. This is what you come for to the Tarcoles River. Crocs, this is us. This is me, my pictures. This is our boat driver. This is a guy from our boat here. That's the same croc you just saw in the previous picture 3.2 seconds later. I'm not hanging that fish out there like that. I am telling you. And then these, just 2 minutes down track, we're still seeing crocs all around. There's these horses running up and down in the river. And I'm thinking, I wonder how long those horses last. How many of those they lose every year in here, because this whole place is just full of crocs. So that's the Tarcoles. Then we back into town, past this little lighthouse, and Costa Rica, got to have the local beer. There it is, Imperial. And that's the end for Puntarenas. This was kind of a nice shot. We were walking back out. We didn't see this sign at all until we were going back to the ship. And we saw this. So that's our ship in the background and things. So that makes a nice goodbye photo. And the last place we're going is Cabo San Lucas. How many people have been there? No, oh, there we go. Yay. Cabo San Lucas. We've been there twice before too. So we didn't do the number one thing to do in Cabo. This is the number one thing to do, and that's not my picture. In Cabo San Lucas is to go out to this area and see that little arch out there in the secondary thing. That's what everybody does. They go out and they see the arch. And they go to these beaches and they drink beer on the boat. And that's what Cabo is famous for, that thing. And we'd already done that twice. So we didn't do that. So we went to a little place. Oh, that's Cabo Sail Inn. This is our meetup. That's an easy place to find, Senor Frogs. If you've ever, everybody been to the Caribbean, every single place has a Senor Frogs. And so if they tell you to meet there, you can find it. And we're going to Todos Santos, which is 45 minutes drive from Cabo. Along the way, we stopped at the beach. We walked up and down this beach, and then we went up and sat on these rocks for 15 minutes and had a soda, and it was just beautiful. Nobody there. 10 miles this way, 10 miles this way, didn't see a car, person, nothing, nobody. We stopped at a little place that it's a couple that emigrated actually from about 50 miles away in Mexico. And they now have been building their own little place. So everything you see here in any of these pictures, they built. This little archway, that's their house back there. It's wide open. It has a couple little roofs, but other than that, it's open and no walls to the thing. And it's that's where they live. And they got 2 kids, about 8 and 10 or 12. And they've been planting and collecting all this desert fauna, and they have a little garden you can walk around in, and it's just really cool to see all this desert stuff there that you can't do that. But what they really do is they hand loom things, blankets and stuff. And of course now Ginny has to do this, you know, so we're in there and she's working on the loom. And you can see the shuttle there, and what she's doing, there's a rope that attaches to a slide bar up here, and you got the shuttle, and put the shuttle in, and you have to really whip that thing with your arm, and then the shuttle will just shoot through the wafts, the things, theoretically. She got one finally. It took her like 5 tries to be able to get the shuttle to go all the way through. Of course, this guy, he's going, whoa, whoa, just that fast. Back, forth, back, forth, back, forth. Takes him about 6 hours to make a twin size covering. So that's pretty fast. This is their kid's bed. That's where their children sleep and things. And that's like rawhide, leather. And that's where they use straps, and that's what they get the support from. This is inside the town, a couple of really cool murals that kind of describe the history of the town. They had a lot of Franciscan friars that came here. You see there was a pretty strong Marxist movement in the area, revolution thing. That's the fists and things, and we'll see another one here. If you look at this one, this is a different one, same building, big. This is a museum. And you can see the hammer and sickle in there, the workers' revolt on the left, things like that. So they're actually very proud of that part of their history when they got their independence in this part of the country. This is Aztec influence, which is you don't see that much of in this part of Mexico. This is interesting, a site with subtle meaning, and Tom asked about the equator a minute ago. If you see that globe is up there, because that globe is exactly on the Tropic of Cancer. And that's why it's sitting where it sits up in that building, that is where the Tropic of Cancer is. Here we go, the Hotel California. There's been lawsuits on and on and on about who's who and which one's really Hotel California and all the things. And this hotel was built in 1950, and it became Hotel California then, and then it had a new name. And then the Eagles came out in 1976 with Hotel California. So these guys changed the name back to the Hotel California. In 1985, the Eagles filed a lawsuit, and it's been ongoing ever since. And in 2001, they got the right to continue as Hotel California. So if you go inside the hotel, of course, Eagles songs are playing. There's T-shirts, records, all this kind of thing. And then since we'd already had local beer in Mexico before, we said, let's go to the most famous restaurant. And this is the most famous restaurant in Cabo, and it's not in Cabo. It's in Todos Santos. It's this one. And it's because they have this. And I'm telling you, that is the best bunch of hot sauce, guacamole, and all that you have ever had in your entire life. And the green sauce there, you can drive your car on that. That is some really, really seriously fiery stuff. And the margaritas are awesome. And now Cabo is a tender port, which we know we've been having the ship come in here and they tender into Alpena. That's the same thing here. That's them hanging from the side of the ship. And you can see if you look toward the back of the ship there, that's the second to the last tender being raised back up into position on the ship. We're on the last one. So I'm taking this from the tender coming back into the ship, and we'll go to the other side of the ship. We'll go around the nose, and that's where there's a small little gangway and port, and that's where you get back on the ship. And they'll drive the tender back around here and winch it back up into position. It's actually a lifeboat, you know, that's the thing. And then 2 days later, we had 2 sea days. We're back in San Francisco, once again, 6:30 in the morning. And that's the end. So any questions or comments or? There we have it. I got.
Favorite part of the trip?
Oh, boy. That's, you know, I like all that. I would have to say, honestly, that doing the ATV thing in Puntarenas, that was, oh, mudslide. It was just unbelievably fun, you know, to do that. Now, Cartagena, though, was so much, everywhere you turned was history there. So that's it. The Panama Canal is a little bit of a, to us, because we'd already been through it and spent 12 hours paying inordinate amount of attention the first time through. So it's very interesting, but not as interesting when you've already done it. I'm going to put a plug in for a presentation next week. Judy knows about it, and so does Tom. I think it's next week. Ron, when is it? Do you know? The first Monday in June. Whenever the first Monday in June is, I think it's next week. I'm doing one on information, disinformation, propaganda, and the rise of hate in America. And it should be pretty eye-watering type of thing. It's something where, you know, you could really get some discussions going depending on who's what and who's got what views and who's want to shoot who. But it's an interesting topic to do the thing. So on the 2nd? 6th?
That's first Monday.
That's it.
The 6th it is.
All right. Anyway, I'm put a plug in for that and tell your friends that should be a good one. All right.
1:30 also?
No, I don't know. I can't remember. I don't think it is. You will have to check. It might be. Probably is, because there's no way I'd let it conflict with pickleball like Ron lets it conflict with his bridge. That's what I said. You know. All right, I'm done. Thank you.